Welcome back to the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It is Unsustainable Wednesdays. Now, if you didn't know already, we have a little bit of a curse on us. For whatever reason, there's some injury curse. Now, you might have heard of the injury ninja. That's a separate thing, but the FHP curse is very real. Pretty much, it's whenever we talk about a player, they die very shortly after. It's a weird phenomenon. We've done it to many players this year. We did it to Korpisalo. We did it to Bjorkstrand for a bit. We recently did it to Zadina. It happens a lot. It really does happen a lot. And we have a amazing listener, Marco from Brazil, who a few weeks ago told us about this. I guess it's kind of like a black magic practice called macumba in Brazil. And he had told us that we needed to perform it to get rid of our sins or to get rid of our bad luck, so to say. We didn't do it, and we killed another player. And so he took things into his own hands and actually performed a macumba in our honor. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a picture here of his whole process. He tweeted it, and it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And if it works, I swear I'll be flying down to Brazil and performing one of these myself every single year, because this is easily one of the greatest things to ever happen to us. Is someone practicing black magic on us to make sure that we don't kill their players.
That's one way to do
really
it.
doesn't.
I mean, we'll see.
We'll see.
It's
I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. I mean, if it doesn't work, I think we're beyond hope at that point. I think at that point we are the black magic.
We'll have to cancel the podcast, or just start talking about players we don't like in a positive manner.
We may have to do an anti-real fantasy hockey podcast. Like maybe on the side we have a fake one where we don't curse players. So anyways, a little fun aside. I hope it works. I really hope it does. And Marco, thank you for doing that, because it was pretty awesome and gave us a lot of good laughs. Although I don't know if I should be laughing. Maybe laughing is going to make it angry at us and actually going to make it worse. Anyways, I guess we'll find out. So, Unsustainably High, as always, we take you through players that we think are doing too well or not doing well enough, or people that are going to continue doing what they're doing. And we already disagreed on one right off the get-go, and that's my first player here on Unsustainably High. That's Jake DeBrusk.
Wrong.
Starting with. Yeah, Brandon disagrees here. Boston, left wing, right wing, 41%. Now, I know Brandon's going to say this because he already gave it away, so I'm going to cheat here and counterpoint his counterpoint. The only thing he has good about him is that his power play percentage is increasing, which is awesome. Great. It's up to 70% over the last 7 days or so, up to around 60-ish over the last 14 days, so that's good. But there's some negative as well. If you look at his last 10 games played, his IPP is 75%, which is pretty high for him. 18% shooting, which is way too high for him. Although, to be fair, he did shoot at 17% last year, so maybe this is possible. And he did get that new stick with a hole in it. So I think that automatically
everything that's happening right now, I'm assuming, is stick with a hole in it.
Yes, I'm assuming it's stick with a hole.
Yeah. So really, Sustainably High sticks with holes.
Sticks with holes, sustainably high. That's the motto of this episode.
I really do like that his shot 60 are up like crazy. He's
I
shooting a lot lately.
I mean, Pasternak tried the stick out, and he said that it was like the craziest thing he'd ever tried. He said he barely put any attempts. He barely tried, and he was getting crazy releases from the stick. So I actually wonder, and I've actually seen reviews from normal beer league guys who say it's the craziest stick they've ever used, that it actually makes their shots way harder. And so if a beer league player is doing that, I can only imagine what that's going to do to a professional player. So I'm actually very curious that if it actually does have a big effect, will we start seeing guys who shoot with sticks and holes actually start to do better? Jake DeBrusk is the first one. And
what I want to know is, what kind of alterations are you actually allowed to make on a stick blade? Like, could you make a wedge in the stick blade that you could then scoop the puck into the stick easily and then just chuck the whole stick into the net? Is that the future?
This is exactly why we stick to fantasy. This is why.
I'm calling Bauer. I'll let you know when I have my licensing agreement with them and we start seeing wedge sticks.
I mean, yeah, you can go use it to shovel snow out of your off your balcony. Who is your next player here? Bauer, I apologize for putting this madness on you.
My first one, and this is funny, we're recording this on Tuesday night, so this game has just happened, and I actually had this player down before the game started, is Andrei Burakovsky, left wing, right wing, 29%. I don't know what his stats are for this most recent game, but I assume a lot of the things I'm going to talk about here are going to apply for, I guess, obvious reasons. And when somebody has a 4-point game, none of it's going to be sustainable. And it's going to make anything that was already looking unsustainable look even worse. So with that in mind, he is currently sitting at like a pretty like not so good time on ice lately. He's skating 14 and a half minutes on average over the last month, which is about 10 games for him. 11 including tonight, but I don't know what his ice time was. His power play is not high. His on ice shooting on the month is only 14%. I say only 14% is still pretty high, but it's going to be a whole lot higher when this next game like files into all this. He's not a point per game player, obviously. He's not shooting much. Even in this most recent game, he only got one more shot. So he's sitting at below 2 shots a game, which is not okay. And I think that'll be a trend on this sustainable episode. If you know why I'm saying that, you probably have a pretty good idea what one of the other unsustainably high players is going to be. If you've been paying attention to recent hype guys. But Burakovsky, his situation has not changed. His power play percentage is even worse than it has been, and it has been pretty bad before that. He's sitting at like 20% to 30% over the last month. Not enough to really get a whole lot done. The thing that's kicking everything into motion here for him is his IPP being 100%. And I assume with him getting 4 points, it's still 100% over the last month, which means every single time a puck has gone in with him on the ice, he has gotten either a goal or an assist. That is not sustainable for anybody. His IPP on the season is 81%. I think that's higher than McDavid, which means he's getting more point share per goal scored while he's on the ice than friggin' Connor McDavid is. I'm actually going to double check this real quick with our sweet little in-season tool. Connor McDavid's IPP on the season is 77. So yeah, there's a lot of things not to like about what's happening with Burakovsky right now. The only thing I do like is that his offensive zone starts are high, but the rest of this is nonsense, and he's going to totally collapse pretty soon. So if you have him, especially after this 4-point game, ship him for somebody just marginally okay.
But does Burakovsky play with a stick in his hole? Or a hole in his stick?
I don't think he plays with a stick in his hole or a hole in his stick. I actually don't know who else has that stick besides
Do I have to tag this episode NSFW? Damn.
Well, now you do.
Stick in his hole. Damn.
You had to lead people that way.
Stick in a hole podcast. That's a good one. If someone out there is trying to start a podcast, that's a great name. Maybe.
This is why we don't actually listen to your ideas.
Yeah, this is probably why. This is why I stick to just editing things. I just stick to the things I can't really screw up too bad. My next one here from Edmonton is Kyler Yamamoto. Right wing, 15% owned, a lot of hype. And look, the thing is, he's not a bad pickup. So don't confuse him being unsustainably high with him being a bad pickup. They are separate things. Someone can both be a good pickup and unsustainably high. It's just about, like we said before, adjusting your expectations. And when it comes to Yamamoto, what he's doing right now is a little insane. 44% shooting over his last 8 games played. Just a little bit high. 15.2% on-ice shooting, also high. And 73% IPP. All of that, of course, is while having no power play time and a pretty mediocre shot pace. And so everything with Yamamoto, to me, just screams it's going to come down.
Not even mediocre. His shot pace is bad.
Yeah, bad. I was being generous to him. It's straight up bad.
It's about as bad as it can be for a player that is getting picked up.
Yeah, and I mean, he's getting picked up like crazy, and I think that at the end of the day, the message with a guy like Yamamoto is, yes, there's something to be excited about here, but not at the levels that he's currently producing. You've got to take off quite a few points for him to actually be sustainable going forward. And I get that he plays with Draisaitl, and that does have an impact. That does increase normally what the on-ice shooting percentage should be, and normally does increase a player's own shooting percentages because people are so good at dishing the puck to them. But the levels at which he's currently producing, Draisaitl doesn't explain that away.
Right. My next one, I feel like you may argue against, but I'm curious to see, because I feel like a lot of what is going on with him is similar to DeBrusque, and that's Pierre-Luc Dubois. No immediate reaction. So
I picked him up in a league, and so the way I see Dubois is like a guy who he reminds me of Yamamoto a little bit. Obviously unsustainable. It's been ridiculous these last few games, but there's something there. There's something to be excited about.
Okay. Dubois is a good player. I'll start with that, but there's a lot of like concerning stuff just in general about him as far as fantasy relevance. Actually in any league, even in a points league, it's hard to really nail down what to expect from him from a point pace. I feel like he's like a 60-point guy, maybe 65, which is actually where he's at right now on a pace perspective so far. So maybe that makes sense. But obviously what's been going on with his last month, him being over 100-point pace over his last 11 games, is silliness. And the weirdest thing about it is that his shots are not there to back it up. His shot pace has been down pretty significantly over the last month. Only 119 shot pace, which puts him at like about a shot and a half a game, which is trash. He's never the biggest shooter to begin with. But typically you expect about 2 a game from him, which is still pretty bad, but not that bad. You look at all the other stats, and it becomes pretty clear that he's very unsustainable. His shooting percentage over that same month is about 19%. His IPP, last season, his IPP was 58%. Over the last 30 days, it's 78%. And on the season, it's 71%. I don't think either of those numbers are right. I kind of would expect PLD to kind of show up in around the 65% area, maybe flirting with 70 as his kind of career and his skills progress a little bit. But I don't expect him to see him north of 70, which is where he is right now, and he's significantly north over the last month. And then the big problem here is the on-ice shooting percentage is 17% over the last month. So when you put all these things together, you have a high IPP, a high on-ice shooting percentage, a low shot pace. All that means that, like, not only is a regression coming, it's probably going to be pretty severe, unless some of these things change. And what's definitely not going to change is the IPP and the on-ice shooting percentage are going to come down. They have to. So the only positive thing you could hope for is that he shoots more, which I do expect, but not enough to make him into like anything more than, like I said before, a 60 to 65 point player with kind of like whatever peripherals.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
I think his power
one-
play points are another thing that kind of make him suck, honestly.
Yeah. I think the other issue that I have, or the biggest issue I have with a guy like PLD, is his consistency. He's been so inconsistent this season, and he has these stretches like he just had where he goes off, and then he just goes invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems sort of like the Blue Jackets in general are that team. You see games where they win by a few goals for a little bit of a stretch, and then they just win by only scoring 1.
Which they did tonight.
So
I think they won in overtime.
Like they did. Yeah, they won 1-0 tonight.
I told somebody to bench Bob.
Game. Yeah,
Good advice from the Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
Great, well done. You never bench Bob. Bob is always a must start. Don't
He played yesterday.
That's a terrible. Yeah, he played in a back-to-back. He had 44 saves.
I know he did. I benched him.
It's fantastic.
In my league. In the Dynasty League, I benched him for Gibson.
That's a mistake.
I got to win.
Terrible. I mean,
I actually needed the win more than I needed the saves, I think. So there's that.
Then you made out okay. Okay, moving on to my next one here. I've got a defenseman, Matt Niskanen, 25% owned, 15% on-ice shooting, 63% IPP, and 18% shooting over the last 4 games. And then if you take a look at those last 4 games, he has 5 points in those 4 games. And if you take a look a little bit farther back, he only has 7 points in his last, I think, 10 games or so. So everything has been coming in these last few games here. That's why I focus on the last 4 games, is that's where all these points are coming from. That's why a lot of people are picking him up. And a lot of things just point to, this is just an all of a sudden, Matt Niskanen is getting really lucky over this stretch right here. And I am not eyeing him really as a long-term target at all.
Nope. He's been a nice surprise just because I have him in Dynasty, but like, I would not be picking him up. Dynasty. It's Dynasty. It's just because my team is so deep that even a Niskanen has some value, but I'm not expecting points out of him really. Well, I am, and even but I'm expecting like a 35-point pace or something.
Yeah.
So that would be nice, actually. I'm really expecting a 30-point pace. But
all
right, my last one here is another one that I would consider pretty similar to Brandon Saad. Is Brandon Saad close to Jake DeBrusk? I was going to say DeBrusk, and then I looked down for where his name was, and I had replaced it when I was looking up McDavid. And so then I looked at Brandon Saad, and I was like, that's who I'm going to talk about.
So you are actually talking about Brandon Saad, right?
I am talking about Brandon Saad and his crazy increased shots. However, if you remember, I argued against Jake DeBrusk being unsustainably high and for him being sustainably high. And here I'm talking about Brandon Saad being unsustainably high. And there's a handful of reasons for that. I do like the shooting lately, but we're talking about 4 games. So this I'm not sure I buy into this increased shot production from him. He's got pretty good deployment for now. However, I'm not sure it sticks, and he's not playing power play at all, either one. So he's also doing this 100% IPP nonsense with reasonably high on-ice shooting to back it up. So it's nice if he's able to keep up this shot production. I don't see it happening. He has been a volume shooter in the past, so seeing him float around 2.5 to 3 shots a game is pretty feasible. But when you drop him back down to those levels, I think we're going to see his points regress to, maybe I think if he keeps the deployment he's on right now, that the line that he's on, the top 6 deployment, then he becomes a decent streamer option in a lot of leagues, in a lot of 10 and 12 person leagues. But he's not anybody to get super excited about. He's kind of a known quantity, even at the best of times.
Yeah. My last one here is Lars Eller, center, 17% owned. Great
Streamed him last week. Loved that.
Yeah. Great streaming option. But over the last 11 games, he's 17% shooting. Kind of insane. IPP is 90% over that same span. And the honest shooting percentage is fine. He's just getting involved in way too many points than he normally does. To be fair, he normally is actually a pretty high IPP guy. So that's not crazy that he's at, that he's at a high number. But somewhere close to like 75% is what you expect. 90% just way too high. And shots are up as well, which is a good thing for him. But not enough to put him on sustainably high.
Yep. All right. Let's move into unsustainably low.
Let's do it. I only have 2, so you start us off with one of yours.
My first one, I think this might be one that people are not going to expect. I'm actually going to look into how he did tonight because their game just ended right before we started here, is Ryan Getzlaf. Now, Getzlaf is not exactly somebody I would recommend to be, owned in every league type of player, but his ownership has dipped down to about 42%. And what's interesting about him, more than anything else, is his just absurd ice time lately. He's floating around at like 20 plus minutes a game, which is about as high as it gets for a forward. The shots for him being, a little over 2 a game are about as good as they get for Ryan Getzlaf, which isn't saying a whole lot, but and also the fact that he's back to getting like majority time on the power play is a nice little bonus. I don't expect him to revert back to what we were seeing in prior years from the Ducks or anything, but I think he's, especially in leagues that count PIMs and hits, he's a little bit more ownable than 42%. Maybe not a ton, but I have him in a couple of leagues, and I haven't really been too worried about it. But I'm just hoping that this time on ice and the shot production and the power play percentage convert at some point into actual points.
That's an interesting one.
I didn't expect to have that one, and then I just saw it, and I was like, he is kind of weird.
Caught me off guard.
Caught myself off guard. Feels funny.
Yeah. You wrote it down, too.
I did write it down, and then I saw it again, and I was like, man, I'm going to say Ryan Getzlaf on this show.
You're like, I actually did that.
Wow. Yeah, he didn't get a point today.
My own
of course
life choices.
But
of course not. Okay, so my first one here is Tyler Seguin, center right wing, 99% owned, of course. I mean, who doesn't own Tyler Seguin for obvious reasons, right? But you're not dropping Tyler Seguin. But there are some things here, and I'm just checking really quickly. I just want to make sure that he did not score, because again, we're recording this Tuesday evening
during games.
During games, so some things happen occasionally. But anyways, his shot pace is finally looking better, which is one of the things that, if you'll remember, I kind of mentioned Dallas reminds me a little bit of San Jose, in which and Arizona, they're weird. They're both. There's not a lot of goals, but they also play very defensive, and it hurts offensive players like Tyler Seguin. Shot pace is looking better, though. That's a huge bump for him, and something that I like, because his shot pace had been dipping quite a bit. 0% shooting over the last 10 games, and 6% on the season. That's insane to me, that Tyler Seguin is shooting at 6% on the season and 0% over such a long stretch. He couldn't buy a goal at the moment if he tried. IPP is low at 64% over the last 10. It should be closer to like 75-ish. So he's kind of getting hurt on all the fronts. And for me, I feel like he's doing so poorly. Tyler Seguin is maybe my favorite buy low candidate. I don't think he's this poor next year. I don't think he's this bad for this much longer. I mean, he's getting the shots, they're just not going in. Maybe he needs maybe he needs to put a hole in his stick.
That's the answer for everybody here.
I mean, nothing is working for him right now. He's getting assists, which is fine, but again, he could be getting assists a little at a higher rate, given that IPP. So, in my opinion, Tyler Seguin is absolutely an unsustainably low. I'm so excited. I got him. I think I had to pay Brent Burns, but at this point, that seems like a pretty clear win. At least if I'm trying to win this year. Yeah, Tyler Seguin to me, especially in keeper leagues, just such a fantastic option, especially if you need to kind of strengthen your wing or center position. If you're towards the bottom or something, I think Tyler Seguin is a prime guy you can get that's going to be a fantastic keeper for you still going into next season. I don't think what we're seeing is regression because, again, like you've said, or we've both said and seen, like normally regression hits you in the shots, hits you in the peripherals, and we're not seeing Tyler Seguin's shot pace really go down, especially given the type of style he's in, right? Like the type of style he's in, like I would expect his shots to come down a ton if this were regression, and I don't think that's the case. I think this is just pure bad luck.
Yeah, I agree. I really like buying low and Seguin right around now.
Yeah.
My next one is Anthony Duclair. I know I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but hear me out.
Here we go. I have him on Sustainably Low.
I bet you do. But I have a couple things to say about him. The first one is I dropped him. So the reason I dropped him is not necessarily because I don't think he's going to get better. It's more that I think everybody else is low enough on him that I feel fairly safe. I don't think he doesn't have that like pedigree that people are going to jump on him when he's doing as poorly as he has been lately. So, I mean, he's got 2 points his last 10 games. Actually, 2 points his last 11 now because he didn't get a point in this most recent game. But the thing I'm looking at the most is he's shooting a lot lately. He had that 9-shot game. He should have had a goal in that game. Olmark just robbed him. But he is, with this last game factored in against the Ducks here, he's going to be sitting below 5% on ice shooting over the last month. Below 5%. That is just insane. So that just means his line is just not getting it done. And by not getting it done, I mean, it's not that they're not taking the shots, as we know he's shooting, but they're not going in. I can't imagine that. I get that the Senators are not a great team, but I mean, Duclair is historically a 14-ish% shooter himself. So you'd think that at least some of his shots be going in. They clearly are not. I really don't know what else to say about him. His power play percentage has been going up. Actually, he played like 4 minutes on the power play in this most recent game against the Ducks. Still couldn't get anything done. His ice time is kind of starting to taper, which is a little bit worrying, honestly. But still about 16 minutes, which is all right. Might be enough to slot him in as like your last forward. But again, like I said, don't blame me if you drop him. But I'm definitely keeping my eye on him. If he starts stringing together points again, I'm picking him up as soon as I can.
Yeah, so the reason I had him on Sustainably Low was, you said all the same things I was going to say. The thing that I had him on Sustainably Low for was that I just don't think he's worth waiting for anymore. Yeah. I dropped him as well. I think the issue is more that when you look at his on-ice shooting percentage, his IPP and everything, yeah, it's crazy low, but what is it when it comes back? 50-point pace? I mean,
I think it can be higher than that.
I don't know. I mean, it's the Senators, and he doesn't. I don't know. I just don't see that there's much upside anymore. Because before, the big thing with Duclair was upside. That was the big needle mover, right? Was, okay,
well, I mean, he was a 10% shooter last season, or on ice shooting last season. So if you just, well, it's not saying a whole lot because that just changes his 2 points into 4. But that coupled with the fact that he's also 50% IPP on the last month is not helping things.
No, I mean, it is the Ottawa Senators hockey. They are a team, and I guess
not as bad as Detroit, not always. Somehow.
Or Buffalo. Buffalo is more disappointing. They're lost 6-1 tonight.
Yeah.
How are they this bad? They have
Carter Hutton's their starter now.
I mean, they have 10 million defensemen. No puck should ever go into the net.
Yeah, they should just stop playing forwards and just play all their defensemen.
Just play all defensemen. It'll probably go better.
All their defensemen and Eichel.
I remember someone the other day on Discord. If you haven't, by the way, join our Discord. 1,500 hockey fans in there. If you're on YouTube, I'll put a link down in the comments below. If you are not on YouTube and you're listening to this on a podcast, click into the description of the episode, and there's a link to our Discord in there. It's virtually a free chat room full of fantasy hockey fans that somehow has not gone to complete hell yet. No matter how big it gets, just continues to be helpful.
Yet is the key word, but yeah.
Yet is the key word here, but it has not, and it's pretty awesome. A lot of keeper talk, just lots of trade talk. It's really awesome. But anyway, someone had asked what I think of Hutton, and all I did was find a GIF of someone throwing themselves into a trash can. That's pretty much what I think of him. That's exactly accurate of what I think of Carter Hutton. Okay, my next one here is a man that I love very, very much, and that's Evander Kane. Left wing 90% owned. I wrote this before he scored his goal tonight. But his last 14 days have been brutal if you ignore that goal that he scored. He's probably a 60-point pace guy on this Sharks team as it is, just because they're terrible and there's not a lot of goals to get in on to begin with. There's a peripheral upside, at least, and he's facing a super low shooting percentage, super low on-ice shooting percentage. There's a lot of things where he should get better. The big question mark kind of is similar to Declare is once he gets better, what do those point totals look like? Because at the end of the day, you can bring all that up, but if there's not a lot of shots to go around, if there's not a lot of goals to go around, there's just not as many points for you to get. And so while I think Evander Kane is unsustainably low, I wouldn't necessarily be expecting a ton of points from him. I think the point pace we've seen from him thus far this season is pretty similar to what we'll see rest of season.
Yeah, that sounds about right, I think.
Yeah, but right now his point pace is at like 14 over the last 30 days. And so I think that's unsustainably low, but I don't think that the ceiling is also all that high. I think Evander Kane, first and foremost, for you is a peripheral person.
Yep.
And you take the points on top.
Yep, especially in Pimps leagues. Very good in
Especially in Pimps leagues.
Okay, my last one here is the NHL's leading shots per 60 at all strengths player that has played like a reasonable amount of games.
See, this is why people punch us for using stats.
Yeah.
It's phrases like that.
Okay, he shoots the most given his time, and that is Max Pacioretty. He leads the league in shots over 60, which is how often he shoots while he's actually on the ice. If you haven't been paying attention, he's been shooting a lot. His current shot pace on the season is 358, which is a lot of shots, and he has been not so good on the point department for some reason. Not horrendous, but he's only got half a point per game over his last 10 games, which is not so good. It's pretty easy to see what's happening here. His IPP is dropped from his normal averages of about 65 to 70% all the way down to 40% over the last month, and even lower as you get to the more recent games. Even though his shot production has increased over that same last month, not including today, so the last 9 games, not including the one on Tuesday, he was at a 501 shot pace. He shot 55 times in those 9 games. What else can you possibly do? So it's all going to come back for him. I do see Pacioretty pushing the point per game mark. He might fall a little short and wind up around 80 points, assuming he plays the rest of the season without injury. But with this shot pace and clicking with Mark Stone the way he has been, and the fact that he's getting majority power play time on a very good Golden Knights team, it all looks positive from here. So just waiting for the points to come back. Not really concerned. I actually think he's a good buy low right now because I still think that a lot of people, people came into the season low on Pacioretty due to last season's 50-point pace over 60 games, 66 games, whatever it was. So people came with this expectation that Pacioretty's washed up and are not quite buying this resurgence, but I'm buying it, and I don't see why you wouldn't, because just the fact that he's already a volume shooter at about 3 shots a game last year and is increased that by 50%, which is a huge number considering how much he already had, should be enough to turn some heads at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I know how much you love Max Pacioretty, and in this case, I think it's actually warranted. And you're right. It's kind of crazy how poorly. I mean, Stone's been affected a bit as well since the coaching change. It's weird.
Yeah, he had 5 more shots tonight, so he's still keeping up that absurd pace. Played 21 minutes as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Sustainably High here, talk about some good players. So my first one here is someone who actually had a Sustainably Low at the beginning of the season, and that's Braden Point. Center 94% owned. A lot to like here. 9% shooting over the last 12 games. Super in line. 17% on ice shooting and only 52% IPP. So those two things could come in line. A little bit of a higher IPP, a little bit lower on ice shooting percentage. He sticks right around the same. He's back on that stacked line with Stamkos and Kucherov, and it's on fire. I mean, I don't get why teams do this, man. I get the whole move offense around, but if you have something that works, why do you touch it?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't get it. I really don't understand it. I mean, I get that from a strategic perspective, it makes it far easier for other teams to beat you, I guess, because they can figure it out. But I mean, if you've really got nothing else, that's your fault. I don't know. It's your problem. I don't know. I mean, I get it. It's just, I don't know why they waited so long. Anyways, Braden Point to me is Sustainably High. I really like what he's doing. You might have missed the buy window by now, but it might be worth checking in and seeing if maybe people pay attention too much to rank, in which case you might be able to get Braden Point cheap still. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I do think that people have kind of gone off of him a little bit, so he may be a little cheaper than might be obvious at this point. But
yeah, like I think there might be. I don't think he's gotten up to levels where he's getting paid what he's worth in a league, but I think he's just below that. He's not a steal in terms of a trade, but he's also not so expensive that you're going to regret it. I think.
Yeah,
it's worth at least checking in.
My first Sustainably High player is 4% owned. And that is Damon Severson.
Ooh.
Yeah.
When in doubt, you and Devil's defenseman.
I don't know, man.
Something special right there.
So Vatanen's out lately. Severson picked up top power play and actually has been kind of sharing that spotlight a little bit. They've been doing a little bit of a two defenseman top power play and just shuffling things around enough that it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. But in this most recent game, they really did push Severson as the top power play player, which is a good sign for the time being. We'll see what happens when Vatanen comes out. I don't think they've really announced that that's like a long-term thing or what, but they're playing him like crazy. In this most recent game that happened on Tuesday night, he played 29 and a half minutes with 5 minutes on the power play, both more than anybody on the team by a pretty significant margin. So I don't have those numbers with the rest of them I'm going to talk about because they're not in our tool yet because it only updates once a day. So again, I had him in here before tonight's game, and tonight's game just reinforces all the points that I had to make about Severson. First one is high time on ice. Just mentioned he played 29 minutes, which is goofy. His power play time on ice is increasing, as I already mentioned, 5 minutes in this most recent game, also great. And his peripherals have just been like very, very good lately. He's never been a big shooter, but over the last month, he's been shooting about 3 times a game, which is fantastic for a defenseman. And even more recently than that, it's been even higher, quite significantly, actually. And then his hits and his blocks as well have been there. 148 block pace, 148 hit pace, 115 block pace over the last month. So he's kind of putting everything together right now. He's a pretty good look in a lot of leagues. He actually didn't shoot at all today because of course he didn't, but he did get a couple blocks. So there's that, and he got a power play assist. So yeah, I mean he's not gonna knock your socks off or anything, but he should be more than 4% owned, and he's worth at least a look until his situation changes.
I mean, I don't know. I was wearing socks before you said Damon Severson, and now I have no socks on. So
or feet. You've been
or feet
cleaved off
knocked
at the calf.
Yeah, just no more feet either. I actually dropped a few inches.
You still have your feet, but they were flayed. You've got no skin left.
Severson is good though. I mean, when you look at defensemen and you consider how many defensemen are highly owned still, like you have Kevin Shattenkirk, you just have all these guys, Provorov, you have all these points guys that are owned very highly, and then you have a guy that's 4%. I know people sometimes get annoyed that we talk about guys like Severson or Ronick or what's his face? I already forgot about Vatanen. People get annoyed sometimes that we mention them so much, and the reason is mostly that when you look at defensemen, especially from a points perspective, there's not a lot to pick up normally.
Nope.
So when there's something there, it's always enticing.
And nobody seems to react to defensemen. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, no. I don't know why. It's weird. When a forward gets 1 point, people freak the hell out. Or, well, unless you're a Leafs defenseman, then every point matters.
Oh, yeah.
That's the only time it matters.
Sandine.
Other than that,
But he has
doesn't
been
matter.
getting a lot of points lately, so it's never going to end with him.
Nah,
As far as
but
the
he got 11
people
minutes the other day.
recommending picking him up, even though he's skating like 12 minutes a game.
Yep. No, thank you. Okay, my next one here is this is funny. Toronto player Willem Nylander, center, left wing, right wing, 89% owned. To me, he's the real deal. 16% shooting over the last 10, so it's a little high. But honestly, he's been so up and down his whole career. I don't know what his shooting percentage is. I don't know if he's a 16%
It's his
guy
best
or...
deployment he's ever had, so that's not too surprising.
Yes.
That's up a little higher, but I don't know if 16%
Exactly.
is the right number, but could be.
Yeah, that's what's hard. I don't know whether that's right or wrong for Nylander. His shots are way up, which is awesome. His power play percentage is amazing. Honest shooting percentage and IPP are right in line. To me, he's a point per game guy rest of the season. I could absolutely see that. And I don't know what he'd cost. He's a Toronto player, so he might cost the moon. But he's a really interesting one where my next two here, both Nylander and the next person I'm going to talk about, are both players that I think in some kind of big package deal they could maybe try to include. And I wouldn't say no if that person was thrown in.
Okay. My last one, since you took DeBrusque, is...
DeBrusque. Oh, yeah, I did take DeBrusque.
Yeah, you called him Unsustainably High. I'm calling him Sustainably High because of his new stick, is Pavel Buchnevich.
You know he's not top line anymore, right?
Is he not? Who is?
No. He got in trouble last game.
Oh, well,
He
whatever.
scored a goal and then got in trouble.
I'm honestly not that worried about it because what's going to happen, I think, is he will eventually be top line again, and Kreider is going to get traded. And what happened when Kreider missed last game is Buchnevich got top power play. That is super exciting to me. The idea that he'll be able to increase his role from both an even strength and power play perspective kind of gives him a lot of value that he might be able to find after this trade season happens. So he's a player that actually, if I was sitting, well, it's kind of hard to say, but if I was sitting real pretty, like I could essentially not worry about this next couple of weeks, I might just hang on to him and see what happens after this trade. The upside is certainly there, at least from a deployment standpoint.
So last game he did play majority time on the top line, but he only played 14 minutes because he got in trouble after that goal. I do agree with you, though, that I think post Kreider trade, he gets pretty interesting depending on where they play him. And there's a chance that he's the one who gets that top billing before everybody else. So I'm curious to see what happens there. I picked him up. I'll probably hold on for a little bit and see what happens. Although I do have 4 Rangers, so probably not, actually. Yeah, no, not going to happen. My next one here is Teuvo Teravainen. Carolina, left wing, right wing, 92% owned. 12% shooting over the last 11. 8% shooting on the season. Only 8. Yes, and he's been phenomenal. On-ice shooting percentage is fine over the last 11 at 11%. IPP is high at 100%, so that's the one thing that you got to kind of point to and say, don't like that very much, because it's been consistently 100% over the last 7, 14, and 30 days. So IPP is very high, but he is a high IPP guy, so even if it comes down, around 80% is not unreasonable for Teuvo, because he got that last year, actually. So, yeah, IPP at 100% is very high, but he still should have a high IPP, so what you're seeing in a reduction of points is not that significant in terms of overall value. And I've seen a lot of trades where people have thrown in Teuvo to sweeten the pot or something like that, and in every case, I'm like, yeah, I really like Teuvo. Someone had asked about Teuvo versus Stone, for example, and I actually like Teuvo over Stone, to be honest. Especially
I like Stone.
if the playoff schedule.
I don't buy that Turbo should be 80%. That's crazy. I know that it was last year. I don't know what's going on, but it doesn't add up to me.
The thing at the end of the day, though, is that even if the IPP is high, his shooting percentage is ridiculously low on the season. Yeah. And the honest shooting percentage could come up a little bit. Like, from a sustainability perspective, I actually think Turbo is more sustainable than Stone. Outside of that IPP, everything else is actually in a better place, I think, than Stone. And I was really prepared to tell the person go Stone, and I actually dug into things a little bit more and said, wow, I actually do really like Turbo. They're very similar, and so it kind of comes down also to playoff schedules, but those two players are actually somewhat similar this year from a fantasy perspective. Maybe not so much real life, but from a fantasy perspective, they're pretty similar. Yeah.
Well, I don't have any left, so.
Yep. So you can take us into Sustainably Low and talk about the bums.
My first one on Sustainably Low, actually, all of my players for Sustainably Low are in the 60% owned area. My first one is, and actually 2 of the 3 have a point tonight, so that's good. My first one is Max Domi. Center left wing, 69% owned, which is crazy high considering he's been not so good for a while now. The biggest problem here is that he essentially got ejected from his second center role and is playing third line center with Lehkonen and Nick Cousins, which is not the best place for him to be in. Suzuki is sitting between Kovalchuk and Armia. I feel like I would much prefer that. It seems like Suzuki's just kind of taken the thunder and run with it. Domi, like I mentioned, did get a point tonight, but I think that we're going to see this kind of bad production from him continue unless he can move back up the ranks a little bit, which I don't necessarily see why they would allow him to at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. My first one here is actually a 90+% guy.
Huh.
You might guess who it is. He sometimes sucks at center. And it's time. It's Claude Giroux. Center, left wing, right wing, 97% owned. Low IPP. Shooting percentage is fine. Granted, he has a 0% shooting over the last 11 games. So, yeah, goals haven't gone in. Similarly to Duke, though, or Anthony Duclair, what is his fixed pace? If his shooting percentage comes back and his IPP comes back, he's probably still a 55 to 60 point guy, which in some leagues worth it. Deeper, 14-team leagues or deeper, fine, worth it. Anything 10 or shallower, in my opinion, he's droppable. 12 is probably the hardest weird spot where I don't really know what to tell you. It kind of depends on what your wire has and how your owners react to players like that being dropped. Shot pace is way, way down. Over the last 11 games played, he's on a 127 shot pace. That's terrible. And on top of that, split power play in Philadelphia. There's nothing good really happening here for Giroux. And this has been a thing now for a while. This isn't like all of a sudden Giroux's been bad over the last 11 games. No, Giroux on the season is on a 57-point pace. So saying that he's a 55 to 60-point guy is not that preposterous. I'm just saying he's going to be who he's been all season. And quite frankly, many of you have already reached out to us saying, what do I do with Giroux? He sucked all season. And I'm here to tell you pretty much that's what you should expect. I would personally try to trade Giroux, see what you can get for him, especially if you're set on dropping. Try to trade first. But I am not against Giroux turning into a streamer spot if he's your worst player. Remember that when you're thinking about players that are doing poorly, like you think about Giroux and whatnot, right? Yes, he's playing poorly, but he's a guy that you'd give a little bit of a longer leash to if, say, you have 2 guys below him that are worse. Then you maybe give Giroux a little bit more of a leash and you use those 2 streamer spots. So don't be too quick to jump the gun and drop Giroux when you have 2 worse players. But that being said, I would give Giroux a pretty short leash, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely agree with all that, which is insane, but
it's nuts. I can't believe it, but it is the case. It's been like this all season. The same with Voracek. At some point, like we said, I think with the Sharks last week and the Flames also, it's like at some point you've just got to accept who they are and stop hoping that they become something else. Like we have enough games under our belt. We know who these players are at this point this season and the deployment and everything.
Okay. My next one is Alex Killorn, who's showed up on everything ever for us as far as droppable and whatnot. He scored tonight, because of course, why not? But yeah, third line, we've talked about him plenty of times. Third line, power play 1 is great, but it's not enough to boost his value, especially in the fact that he's not shooting anymore. The peripherals are essentially gone. He gets a few hits, but not enough to really back up anything else that's going on here. And nothing to like. There's nothing to like. Especially considering he's absolutely not a lock on that top power play. So it could, in fact, likely will get even worse. So Killorn, him still being in the 60% owns is just crazy. And I'm sure now that he scored a goal, people aren't going to drop him again. I would drop him.
Yeah, I think he was on drop candidates on the week preview, right?
Yep.
It's absolutely time. So you took Anthony Duclair for me, so I have one more only. And that last one is Thatcher Demko, goaltender 11% owned. With Markstrom going God mode, Demko is pretty much relegated to the sidelines. He also has not played very well in his last few starts. So I think, granted, Markstrom did get kind of shelled a little bit by Boston today, but even in the shelling of a 4-0 loss, he still had to stop 38, had a 905 save percentage, so still did really well. Was one of the stars of the game. So Markstrom has just been playing so well that it's hard to see Demko getting any big majority starts here anytime soon. And actually, even in a keeper league perspective, I didn't think this was going to happen, but I've got to agree with you now that I don't see them letting Markstrom go. I don't know how you can let him go. I think you gotta keep him around for a little bit. And that's what I've seen actually from a lot of beat writers too, is that they actually feel that there's a very good chance that Markstrom stays, which is interesting.
Everybody likes Vancouver, man. They don't want to leave.
I know. It's a great place to play. I mean, the media is kind of crazy, but aside from that, they have, they have such a legacy too. Messier's up there. The Sedins. It's just, it's a beautiful, beautiful city.
Okay. I'm just going to move on. My last one is, and somebody we've talked about many times, is Phil Kessel. He's still 69% owned, which is crazy. He doesn't matter in almost every league at this point.
Yeah.
The fact that we still have him in the cupful is kind of funny. And I think the only reason, if that was a 12-person league with smaller benches, we would not have him anymore. Even though it's a 14-person league with pretty deep benches, still probably worth dropping at this point. So, he sucks, and his shots are down, and he doesn't. If he's not getting power play points, which he isn't, because how is he going to? He's not really doing much for you. So we've always known him to be a point forward guy that gets a lot of points on the power play, and what we're seeing is a guy that can't get points, can't get power play points, and is not shooting. I don't know, man. It's not good. It's bad.
Welcome to the club.
Yep.
Finally.
Yep.
I
was kind of there. I wasn't going to drop him, but now, I don't see how you could trade him even.
You absolutely can't trade him. No way. It's ridiculous. I've been saying this for a while, right? That how I'm so low on Kessel. And finally, you have come to the dark side. I mean, the writing was on the wall, in my opinion. To be fair, though, I was wrong about Hall. So, not always right. Can't win them all.
For now.
Only win a few. For now. So there you go. That is the Unsustainable episode. We have the weekend preview to come out. That'll be on... when do we put out weekend previews? We put those out on Thursdays. Thursdays, yes. We put those out on Thursdays. So keep an eye out for the weekend preview. Aside from that, like we said before, join our Discord. You can also check out our Twitter at Fantasy Hockey PD, or go to our website, fantasyhockeypodcast.com, and find a bunch of fantasy hockey tools on there that are free to use. Pretty much everything is free for us, except for our time, I guess, when you play us in listener leagues. Anyways, thank you so much for listening and watching. We will catch you next time.
Yep. Thanks for listening.